All right, so for Wednesday of last week, we were working through our kind of big, you can still kind of see the outline of it there, half erased on the board. Kind of the bigger, slightly more detailed outline for interps, so that we have plenty enough stuff to say, whether it's staffed or not staffed. And the saying is the communication piece of it. And we started filling in some things that are important to have, particularly in the pre-game section, talking about the safety check and gathering yourself and all that. There are also a couple of things that we want to make sure that we are not doing. So negative checklist items are sometimes just as important as affirmative or positive checklist items, where we want to be doing something to make sure that it is set and ready for the intern. A couple of things to add to your pre-interp section is gonna include things like don't eat or drink certain foods if it's staffed interpretation, and that's gonna mostly boil down to as far as things not to drink right before getting in front of a bunch of folks and getting ready to talk for maybe an hour or two. There's gonna be milk and orange juice. Both of those end up with your vocal flaps coated, in the case of milk, with proteins and the milk fat, the saturated fat produced by the cow. And in the case of orange juice, highly acidic drinks can trigger a mucosal response in your upper respiratory system, and so it generates, sort of this post-nasal drip. Like when you have a cold that's not quite a chest cold yet, but it started up in your sinuses and your head feels like a balloon and you're swallowing a bunch of snot kind of all day long. That's post-nasal drip. You're setting up something similar, but temporarily. It's sort of a low-key defense mechanism for your upper respiratory system to try to coat itself in mucus to try to sort of insulate itself or wall itself off from the mild irritant of the organic acid, the citric and ascorbic acids in orange juice. Citric acid for the flavor and ascorbic acid, the vitamin C. So, whatever other foods beyond that are not helpful for you, and as you get older and more tired, you'll start to notice the effects of what you eat a little bit more on both your focus and your energy level. So in a totally unrelated field, long-haul trucking, there's an old sort of bit of wisdom that a lot of long-haul truckers swear by, and that is to not eat proteins and carbs together. So that is, you'll see a lot of these guys or gals, if they're stopping at a Hardee's or something, they'll get a hamburger and they'll eat the meat separately from the bun. Does that make sense? So in combining those two things, they think that triggers more of that sort of tiredness and insulin spike and so forth. These days with modern nutrition and dietetics, we might suggest, have a well-hydrated and very protein-rich breakfast to kind of kick off your day, and leave the big meal and the carbs for a little bit later. So, to the extent that you have any particular dietary needs or restrictions, and as you start to get to know your sort of daily energy rhythms, when am I really on? For a morning person, that 8 to 11 a.m. period is like prime real estate in terms of your energy level throughout the day. And for an evening person, a night owl, typically that's not really appealing to be on station at 8 o'clock and firing on all cylinders. It can go right into the evening. So to the extent that you guys have sort of mapped this out on yourselves, anybody, just show of hands, anybody kind of think, I'm definitely more of a morning person. Like I roll out of bed and I don't want to lose that first part of my day. Anybody? Nobody. Wow. Okay. Anybody? I'm definitely more of a night owl. I'm really at my best at 8, 9 p.m. that's really when my day kind of comes alive. And I might have been awake all day, but I'm not necessarily happy about it. All right, so it's good that this class meets at 1 p.m., right? Okay, very cool. So, all that to say, that list of positive and negative checklist items in the pre-interp section is going to be a little bit individualized, but generally speaking, you don't want to eat a whole bunch of sugar and carbonated beverages right before you jump out in front of people, for the obvious reason. Beyond that, let's move forward into our introduction section. So, last time we talked a little bit about presenting the theme or presenting some kind of enticing or inviting or kind of advertising, if you want to look at it that way, thing at the very start of your introduction where you're actually now out in front of folks or you're trying to catch folks' attention on the cover of the Junior Ranger Guidebook that your kid interpretation participants are going to be a part of. We call that the hook. And that is kind of an obvious thing, but it's also generally more successful when you follow a couple of strategies along that line. So let's talk a little bit more about the hook in specific. So that we're starting to put together these interpretive outlines, right? So if you still have your copies of those, pull those out along with your notes. So again, within the interp outline, pre-interp, we've got the intro, we've got typically 5 to 7 thematic points or logical units of content that may be necessarily in some sequence or order, like if you're telling a story throughout to sort of unify or thread through your intro. Or they can be more topical, as it's called, where you can kind of encounter any of those chunks of content in any order. If you've ever been to a children's museum, you tend to adopt a very topical structure for those. You don't have to go to this exhibit before you go to this one, because, kids being kids are going to run all over the place and encounter things just as they do. So to help sort of manage that, again, content section can be sequential or topical, and so on down the outline. But right now, we're talking about the hook. So just like the theme, our hook is going to have a whole bunch of sort of useful ideas or techniques to help you sort of get the ball rolling on designing this. So again, the hook for that interp that we watched the other day at Yosemite National Park with Shelton Johnson, that was utilizing a recorder or a wooden flute type instrument that was period accurate to the turn of the century and among United States cavalry soldiers in the west coast of the United States. And that was an interesting choice. So, zooming out from that example, we have sort of the concept or the design principle of why would Shelton Johnson pick a flute? He's actually pretty okay at playing it. I don't know if he was playing a melody or just sort of a bunch of euphonic notes that didn't sound terrible together. I'm not really a music person. Like, I can't do anything useful with my life or create anything with beauty, right? I'm a forester. Anyway, but it was useful and it was effective, A, because of the skill it brought to it, and B, because it was a little bit unexpected. All right, so we're going to use the somewhat goofy definition for a hook of abnormal or unusual. What I like the word abnormal is just stimulus. So that's a weird definition. Jeez. Your hook is nothing more than something unexpected. And hopefully thematically related, like you don't really want to come at people out of left field playing electric guitar if you're going to be interpreting something historical before about 1950, but that leaves it pretty wide open for us. Okay? So, go ahead and pull out your outlines, kind of the notes to yourself that you were putting together at the end of our last class session on Wednesday. Let's take a look at the hook. Okay? This is generally for staffed interpretation, something that doesn't require any previous or pre-existing attention or focus or buy-in from folks that happen to be around the area and so forth. So, generally clearly audible or clearly legible, that is readable, is a visual hook for typically more non-staffed interpretation. And it has to be able to, without being annoying, cut through the normal sort of hubbub and noise and babble that you would expect at a place like a national parks visitor center with up to hundreds of people kind of milling around, looking for the bathroom, chasing their kids into the gift shop. All of the just normal nonsense and chaos that happens in a visitor center or the lobby of a museum or outside any of the structured interpretation sites at St. Louis Zoo and so forth. Like, most of the folks typically don't have any idea that something is about to happen. So it's got to be pretty, not just intelligible, that is clearly hearable or clearly readable, but it's also got to be interesting, right? So, and inviting. Not making noise for the sake of making noise. You have a couple of seconds to do this, right? With some previous field research that we've done in a related area, we found that most visitors will give any particular stimulus 2 to 3 seconds on average to figure out, is this worth my attention or not? Okay? So think about that. You have 2 to 3 seconds to let people know about the really hard work on a really cool and interesting and important topic that you've been putting together this interp on. And this 2 to 3 seconds applies for the cover of a book, the thing that you hear at the visitor center, the announcement over the PA, the advertisement for the listing of the guided hike as folks are walking by, sort of the information sign for the day. You get 2 to 3 seconds because there are a lot of other information sources that people are normally and naturally trying to evaluate as well. Okay? So it's got to be unusual. And that's going to help you with that interesting part. Right? Beautiful read or recorder music, a little bit unexpected and interesting, and it's inviting, right? So you have, how many words would you say with a hook? How many words does somebody speak in 2 to 3 seconds? Whatever number you're imagining, take about 10 to 15% off the top there, squirrel it in, because in public speaking, if it's an audible hook, we need to speak a little bit more slowly, because folks, we can't assume that they speak English as a first language, or that they speak English or can hear and interpret English at anything beyond that 5th or 6th grade level, right? So we're not going to load our hook up with a bunch of technical jargon and stuff like that. It is a quick blip on the consciousness and awareness of folks as they're sort of milling about, okay? So, pull out your outlines that you've been working on. Let's take a look here. Take a look at the hook. Nice thing about the hook is that you have about 1 million different options, just like you do with the theme that's going to come immediately following the hook, typically. Or a little bit later in the introduction if you need to establish just a little bit of context before you communicate sort of the beating heart of your interpretation, the theme. Okay? So just like with Sergeant Alizé Bowman, standing outside of the Yosemite Visitor Center, he doesn't start with talking about Buffalo Soldiers. He starts by doing something, all right? So what with your topic and sort of the theme that we're building this hook around, what's something that's an action you could maybe fashion into a hook somehow? Talking about rock hunting in southern Illinois, the hook can be as simple and straightforward as having a rock hammer and a geode wrapped in a paper bag or a towel or something like that, and saying, hey everybody, you want to see what the inside of a fresh grown crystal looks like? Whack. Right? And making a point of using the rock hammer to help create a bit more of an audible signal. Okay? So, take a couple minutes, just reflect. There is no wrong answer for this, right? Just some hooks might be a little bit more effective or suited than others. So that's fine. Our approach here is to do what's called ideating. Give yourself absolutely safe, full, and free rein to come up with a bunch of ideas, knowing that you're not on the hook, no pun intended, to use any of them. We're just ideating right now, and that's okay. Something along the lines of fiber arts, like crocheting. Maybe you have created yourself as the interpreter, or have some absolutely exquisite examples of some handmade crocheted blankets, for example. So my sister, who has nothing to do with this class, once crocheted me a Mandalorian helmet blanket, right? What a sister. That's pretty cool. And she crocheted my wife a Baby Yoda blanket. How cool is that, right? And even if you're not a Star Wars fan, it's immediately apparent the skill and the effort that went into something like that. So your hook, if you want to go the visual route for crocheting, could be to kind of in an elevated spot, maybe to start off the hike or whatever it is, or the walk around the crochet exhibit, or to the skill demonstration area where you got a couple of people crocheting, is to sort of flip out this beautiful example of what you're going to be engaging with over that next hour in a spot, again, sort of lifted up on a platform or a stage or something like that, so that a lot of people, even just milling around on the far side of a big room full of a couple of hundred people, everybody can kind of see it. And anybody who's even a little bit curious, whether about the technique or the materials or the content of, if it's a representational crochet blanket or whatever, maybe they're Star Wars fans too, and so they wander over for that reason, right? So whatever that sounds like for your topics, any of them. You don't have to lock yourself into just one here. Kind of list them out. Now, with this guideline of 2 to 3 seconds for the hook, that is backed by a whole bunch of field research and stuff like that. We just can't get away from or can't get around kind of how people's brains work in an attention demanding environment. So that's going to be sort of the key 2 or 3 seconds of it. The hook, if you're thinking of some things that it's like, I can't do this in 2 to 3 seconds, it just takes a little bit longer than that. Like it's a longer sentence, that's okay. If you think back to Shelton Johnson's world-class example that we saw the other week, he played essentially a short song, maybe about 90 seconds worth of play. So he's taking valuable time out of everything else that he can do for that hook. This is pretty important, right? Because if folks miss the hook, then they're necessarily going to miss everything else. You miss 100% of the shots that you don't take. Michael Jordan, right? As quoted in popular old sitcom The Office. So, it can be longer than 2 to 3 seconds. But the important part of it, the attention-grabbing part, has got to be 2 to 3 seconds. Okay? Cool. So, take a couple minutes. Just list some out. To be a flashy or visible part of a skills demonstration. At national battlefields, you'll very commonly hear an announcement that is clearly audible for the sake of everyone's well-being, given America's war-fighting tendencies and the PTSD that comes along with that. They'll announce very clearly in the visitor center so that there's no mistaking, and it's a very straightforward, quick announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be demonstrating the firing of field piece artillery. In 10 minutes in front of the visitor center, you will hear 2 loud concussive shots. Okay? So that does a couple of things. A, that's a pretty good hook. Oh, cool, we're gonna go blow stuff up, right? And second, it's also kind of protective of your participants who might have a genuinely negative or sort of maladaptive or decompensating response to hearing, gunfire or cannon fire in that case. So you want to think about your hook in terms of the well-being of your visitors as well. Now, most of the time, we don't have to sort of couch an announcement in terms that is protective of folks, who might be dealing with what they used to call shell shock or whatever. But if there's any way in which, maybe with that rock hammer and the geode, if that can sound like a gunshot, we want to let people know that. Okay, this is okay. This is a good sound. It's coming up, and it's actually pretty cool and interesting. Why don't you come on over and check it out, right? And so forth. So, how's everybody doing? We've got a couple of minutes thinking about this now while I'm talking at you. Anybody got any cool ideas? You don't have to be super proud of them. We're just in the ideating phase, right? They don't have to be perfect. They don't have to be amazing. They just got to be ideas. Yeah.
Going off like the rock hunting idea again. I'm on the fence about this, I guess, ethically, and I think you'll see why in a second.
Okay.
I would plant a cool rock in the area where we're going to start.
Absolutely.
And I'd be like, oh look, and I'd pick it up pretending that I found it on the ground right there to get their attention so that they know, like, it's just like, they're all around us, you just kind of have to like look for them, like to keep their eyes peeled. I explain what the rock is, show it off, and then I admit that it was planted to regain their trust in me.
Okay. That makes some sense to me. Yeah. Who doesn't like a scavenger hunt, right? Okay, so we talked about games as being one staffed or non-staffed, depending on how you want to set it up, kind of a thing. Junior Ranger guidebooks are full of games. Some of them are like on the page games, and some are just instructions on the page to go do in the environment in a safe and fun and educational way. You want to be careful with using a game as a hook. If like the first stage of the game lends itself very well to a hook and that like kicks off the whole thing, that's perfect. That's a very, very easy, friendly, and recognizable entry point. I mean, everybody since the beginning of time knows what a scavenger hunt is, and that there's probably some interesting things around. On the other hand, games can incur a bit of sort of overhead or setup time to explain any unfamiliar rules or mechanics or kind of safety boundaries, like we play here but not over there because there's a big road right there, for example. So think about using essentially universally recognizable games. And when I say universally, I mean like universally. Like, we don't want to make assumptions that games that you and I grew up playing are familiar to anybody from an international context who's there at your park or a museum or whatever the visitor center is or wherever. That hook has got to be super inclusive, maximally inclusive. Okay? Cool. And I think a scavenger hunt qualifies for that. We can pretty well figure that one out without any thought invested. Anybody else? There might be some interesting ideas. Playing music, okay? Well, like a recording of music. Yeah, maybe a video of the musicians okay. Cool. I like it. Music is a great one. Everybody loves music. We all might like different kinds of music, but that's one of those universals. Excellent. Anybody else? Yeah.
I guess mine was still like learning how to have like a demonstration of like hitting a ball and passing. I want to learn how to do that.
I like it. Okay. Yeah. So that's part of a game as well. And specifically in the skill demonstration vein of that part of a game. Yeah, cool. Awesome. These are all great. Okay? So, what we are trying to sort of start to sort out the list of potential hooks that you have going. What we're kind of going with it is the so-called 3-33 rule. So, have any of you guys taken like maybe a more advanced speech communication class? You heard of the 3-33 rule? All right, cool. Well, let's talk about that. This is a useful one. So, this is going to be one of our unbreakable for the purposes of this class rules of design. We don't want to violate this one because, again, this is just kind of how people are wired, behaviorally and cognitively, right? And this has been a thing for a while. This goes way, way back. It's pretty well battle tested. So, in interpretation, you have 3 seconds to grab and hold people's curiosity. Included in the 30 seconds, we have that first 3 seconds. We have 30 seconds to inform people a little bit more for them to make a decision to commit or to balk. B-A-L-K. Balk means run away or walk away or just like avoid eye contact. Like, oh God, I hope Park doesn't call on me, right? That would be a low-key form of balking, sort of turning away and not engaging, but making a conscious or unconscious decision to do that, okay? To withdraw, to separate from. And then you've got 3 minutes to deliver essentially the payload of that chunk of content. So we're gonna nest this 3 seconds, 30 seconds, 3 minutes rule into each one of our logical divisions of the inter outline. We got 3 seconds for a hook. And then we've got 27 more seconds to help folks decide. Do I want to check out the scavenger hunt, or oh, she's doing a volleyball demonstration, or another sports demonstration, or crochet something, or whatever, paddling, whatever it is. How much time is this gonna take? What's expected of me? Am I gonna have to like talk in front of other strangers? Am I gonna have to pass the ball back? I don't know how good I am at this. Is this an interactive thing, or is this like a demonstration for me and I just watch? Right, we have 30 seconds to establish all of those things, understanding that at the end of those 30 seconds, people have made their decision about the next hour, okay? Or 2 hours, or 4 hours, however long the experience is. Like, you ever, on the first day of class, certainly not with this class, but you ever, on the first day of class, the professor walks in the room, or maybe your old high school teacher walks in the room, and within kind of that 30 seconds, maybe a couple of minutes range, you're like, this is going to be a great semester. Or, this is going to be a trash fire of a semester. Oh my God, is it too late to add drop? You know? We make pretty quick, intuitive or gut level decisions about this kind of stuff, and you don't know how the rest of the semester is going to be. But your first 30-second impression, probably not completely wrong. You know? First impressions matter. So, by codifying that sense into this 3 seconds, 30 seconds, 3 minute, 333 rule, we can kind of remind ourselves, okay, I don't want to wind up into this huge, long monologue about how much fun it would be to go rock hunting instead of getting right into the rock hunting. Okay? We want to do this. And each transition from the end of one chunk of content, one thematic point worth of stuff, one activity, one topic, or subtopic. Transition out of that and into the next one is another 333 opportunity. Does that make sense? We have to kind of check in with folks and kind of sell them on the next little chunk of it. All right, so we're about to do X, Y, Z. And then transition out was, so we've just finished X. Now let's think about and talk about and maybe engage with, knock the ball around, Y. Okay? Or ABC, down the list. Sound good? Cool. All right. So, 333 rule. Let's take another look at your list. And, you know, maybe if you have 2 or 3 different ideas, just for each one, ask yourself, can I get this rolling in 3 seconds? Can I grab attention using this idea in 3 seconds? And if the answer is yes, great. If the answer is no, great. That make sense? Cool. So, there's no penalty in sorting out any of these ideas as we get a little bit further into the process. So, take a second to Evaluate your hook ideas on the 333 basis. 333 rule is especially important with non-staffed interp. So, some of you guys and gals are working on non-staffed interp modality, regardless of your topic. And we want to be especially cognizant of this rule. Get right to the action immediately on the cover of the document or on the first screen of the electronic presentation or whatever the format is. Because now we're competing not just with everybody present in the room, but everything on the smartphone in the pocket, right? It's just another thing on a screen, or just another thing on a page, or a sign, or what have you. So, this is going to put some pretty hard limits on the number of words on an interpretive exhibit or a sign, yeah? If we need to be able to get through all of the content of a single sign, which might have a couple of different panels of stuff, but one full sign, a 4 by 8 foot size thing, for example, if we have to get through all of that content with an average of 6th or 7th grade reading level in 3 minutes, that's like this much text. Right? We talked before about how, it's easy to just crap out a bunch of stuff in a draft, and it's really hard to have every word doing some good work. Yeah? So, in this class, you're not going to have to write a book. You're going to have to write very, very short things. Very short things. Oh my gosh, it's going to be frustrating how short it is. There is going to be so much blood on the editing room floor, to use the metaphor. Right? So, take a look through your list. Anybody bravely willing to volunteer? I've got this idea for a hook, but I don't think I can pull it off, the crucial part of it, in 3 seconds. Anybody? That's where most of my ideas die, and that's okay. Very healthy thing. All right? Anybody got an idea that at least might catch attention in 3 seconds? In a way that you can get the ball rolling in that first 30 seconds? So folks can make that critical decision. Do I, as the song goes, should I stay or should I go? Should I stay or should I go? Anybody? Anybody got something that might work in 3 seconds?
So if I was doing like a presentation on PowerPoint, like how to make a good engaging PowerPoint, I'll start with like a really cluttered intro side that looks kind of ugly, but like in a way that you can't keep your eyes off it. Ugly, not like you want to not look at it.
Like it's a beautiful disaster?
Exactly.
It's like a bad Christmas sweater? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. And then I would have some sort of like a wham sound effect or like a boom, like something's happening sound effect. I don't know how to put that in words.
Okay.
And then it would transition into like a good looking, well animated intro slide so that they can see the changes that we make happen.
It sounds like you really get the point of this exercise. I like that. Set a very low expectation for that first slide. And then be like, no, it doesn't have to be like that, right? Yeah. Okay. Cool. And that transition from the first to the second, that's not a transition that's happening in 3 seconds, right? We can't meaningfully process, intake, look at, and evaluate an ugly slide in 3 seconds, and also meaningfully look at a well put together, well polished, an aesthetic slide, and do that meaningful compare contrast between them. Now, in 30 seconds, absolutely, right? We're pretty good at sniffing in when something kind of stinks and figuring out pretty quickly what's going on, okay? So, we don't want to load you guys on under the sort of unreasonable expectation that you have to accomplish everything in those 3 seconds. Just the hook. Just the hook. Just that first ugly slide. Okay? Cool. All right. Very good. Any questions about this so far? We're scaffolding this really, really sort of thoroughly, right? We're now, in our 3rd week of classes? And we're just, is it 3rd or 4th? 4th week of classes.
We missed the whole week for the first week, basically.
Yeah, we did, kind of. And we're just on, like, the theme statement and the hook, right? There's so much more ground to cover from here. But without this stuff, And without the ability to sort of generate this stuff, feel pretty okay about it and sort out some ideas that are good but not right. All of the rest of the cool stuff that we can get into with the skill demonstrations and paddling around and just all of it, rock climbing, whatever, it doesn't matter because we lost them at the hook, you know? So, we want to land really, really hard on this and put a lot of effort into this. A lot of the content is going to flow and sort of come together pretty naturally into your outline. Like, it's the stuff that you want to talk about, that you're excited about, that you're interested in. But sometimes helping folks understand in a crowded and information overload kind of life way, where we have our email on our wrists and stuff like that, we gotta put in a little bit of work to break through that and connect with people. Sound good? All right, let's take a quick break here. We'll stretch your legs for 2-3 minutes. Go get some water. It's a little bit warm in here, a little bit noisy. These chairs are horrible, so do your lymphatic system a favor. Move around a little bit. Help the conveyor belts of your body move all those metabolic byproducts and environmental toxins around and out. Use the restroom if you need to. Come back to it refreshed. Boom. All right. Does anybody have a tent? Cool. Does anybody have a sleeping pad that goes inside the tent? All right. Does anybody have a ground sheet that goes outside the tent so the tent has a sleeping pad too and doesn't get poked by rocks? All right. How about a sleeping bag that can go down to about 20 degrees, at least in survival rating, if not comfort rating? Are you aware that sleeping bags are rated for either comfort or survival? And typically not both, and they usually don't tell you which. It seems like a big oversight, doesn't it? Kind of like an important detail. All right, let's talk about sleeping bags for a sec. We've got half a dozen sleeping bags available for anybody who doesn't have one rated to 20 degrees, because we want to plan for the worst and hope for the best, weather-wise, but end of February can be burly. Right? We're not even into March, which is in like a lion, out like a lamb. The comfort rating is the coldest temperature at which the sleeping bag is comfy. Its survival rating is even lower. The survival rating of a sleeping bag is what it will get you alive through the night, but you're not going to be happy about it, right? So, when I was backpacking along the Appalachian Trail, right after I graduated college, I had a 0 degree sleeping bag in southern Tennessee in March. We hit 0 degrees a couple of times, and I was not happy about it, but I survived. So, whatever sleeping bag you're planning on taking for this class, or for any trip, you want to take a look at the label, and maybe you have to go to the manufacturer's website to understand, especially if it's a faded label, whether or not the number on there is comfort or safety. Right? So we need at least a survival rating of 20 degrees Fahrenheit for this class, just in case we get another polar vortex. We've already had one this year, and California is about to float away into the Pacific with all the rain they're getting, the Pineapple Express. So please take a look at whatever sleeping bag you're planning on bringing for this trip. Know your gear, inside and out. I have a ton of cooking gear, gas stoves, propane butane mixed stoves, alcohol stoves. We can purify water in that way, although at the Ozarks getting like treated city or tap water is not much of an issue. I also have a bunch of water filters, so we can filter water around some of the biggest springs in the world. There's going to be an abundance of water, and usually in February and March there's no shortage of water in the Ozarks, so that's something to look forward to. Would you guys and gals be more interested in a landward trip? Or, for example, if anybody is interested in paddling, we can spend like 1 or 2 nights potentially along the river in Ozark Scenic Riverways. It's run by the United States National Park Service. They do a ton of environmental and historic interpretation, not very much cultural interpretation, but the other two pretty strong. what would you guys and gals like to do in terms of mostly walking around or mostly paddling around? And if you're like not cool with being on canoes, that's okay. Right? We usually do a little bit of paddling on an itinerary like this, but if that's not something you feel safe or comfortable doing, that's okay. Right? The point of this trip is not to have a blast paddling. That's a nice side effect. The point is to learn a lot about interpretation. So, let me know what you guys and gals would like to do. The Mark Twain National Forest is all around there. The Pioneer LED Forest, Peck Wildlife Ranch, which does conservation stuff, raise a bunch of elk, that sort of thing. There's all sorts of stuff to do and go and see, but one big sorting factor is, do you mostly want to spend time on water or on land to do it? So, open mic, open question to you guys. This part is a democracy, otherwise I'm a benevolent dictator. Maybe not benevolent, but at least a dictator. No. What would you guys and gals like to do, float versus not float-wise?
I'm comfortable with both.
Comfortable with both. Okay. Anybody else? Say again?
We do a mix.
Okay. Good. Anybody violently opposed to a mix of on water and off water? All right. So, would you like to mostly be on land and like do a day trip paddle on a shorter section, or would you like to, have our mix of land navigation off the water, meaning throw our tents in the canoes and paddle from campsite to campsite? Just kind of a different vibe. Is it more the wild river, or is it more the scenic river in that particular area? Which do you guys vibe more with, as the youth these days say? I mean, I'm cool either way, right? It's an awesome trip no matter what. But every once in a while, not every year, but every once in a while, we get somebody like, no, man, fuck canoes. No, we're not. No. What's the alternative trip option? Jeez. I don't know, whatever. Cool. All right, so I'll take a look at maybe one night on the water instead of two. Is that a good split? All right, we'll go with that. We'll plan on leaving first thing Friday morning so that we have a chance to get some sunlight hours on target on site before it gets ridiculously dark. Every once in a while we have to leave at like 11 a.m. and we get there and we put up tents and it's dark and it's Saturday, so I don't want to do that too much. Cool. Does anybody? Yes, question.
I just was gonna say, if you don't like have the gear already, you can rent it for really cheap at the rec. They have pocket rockets and everything that you don't feel.
And if this kind of stuff is something you do all the time, but you don't have gear of your own and you're thinking about sort of building up your own professional library of equipment, Johnny Trails is a pretty great local store, and he'll price match stuff online, which is a little bit unusual. But he's trying to, sort of do right by SIU students as a local business and stuff like that. In the past, I can't guarantee this, but in the past when my students have mentioned to Rick that they're getting this gear for a forestry class or outdoor rec or wherever, sometimes he'll just throw in like a 10% discount just to be cool, because this stuff is expensive, and he's trying to not gouge people. If you are thinking about buying stuff and it's new old stock, like it's the 2023 sleeping bag and the 2024 sleeping bag is basically the same thing but like a different and still kind of ugly color, you can get new old stock usually for a big discount, even if it's like 8 or 10 months older than the new stuff. Neither one of them has ever been used. He's just trying to clear out inventory space. So think about that. That could be a pretty good deal for you. You don't have to buy anything or spend really much of any money in this class to impress me, right? We're all just trying to get on the field trip and so forth. So if you can beg, borrow, or steal equipment from classmates, from your uncle that used to go hard and then his knees blew out and now he's got a whole bunch of like bomber grade camping or backpacking gear that's just kind of in his basement, if it's not moldering, bring it along, right? Again, no need to spend extra money on gear in this class to impress me. Base Camp has really good quality stuff. If the backpacking class is going the same weekend, some of those sets might be checked out for that. Okay, cool. Yeah. So definitely don't wait till right before to place your reservation if that's what you want to do. I do have some stuff. I'm the Backpacking Club's advisor, and I store all of their stuff in one of my research labs with the agreement that they're free to use my stuff and we're free to use theirs. So that's also really high quality gear too. So between all of these different options, you should be able to get everything pretty well good to go. If you'd like, I'll post it on our course website if it's not up already. Like a pretty detailed packing list that I use for summer camp, where we go camping for 3 weeks sometimes straight. So that's the full list of gear. And for a 1 or 2 night overnight camping trip, the gear list is kind of the same as for a 3-week trip. So that's a useful thing. And I've got a couple of different options for most of the problems that you need to solve with gear. Don't feel like you need to get all of the different options. I've probably got most of them stored in the lab for you. And B, if you can make water safe to drink one or a couple of different ways, you don't need to make water safe to drink like 8 different ways. But I give folks those different options based on their skill level or their comfortability, or every once in a while you get a gearhead who's like, Park, I got it all, man. Just like the whole list, backed the truck up and loaded it up, yeah. So, take a look at that. That'll be on the course website, and we'll be good to go with gear. If anybody has any dietary restrictions, any food allergies, or religious or spiritual observances for your diet, that's okay. Let me know confidentially one-on-one. We'll get that taken care of. If not, let's divvy up meal prep so that it's not me killing everybody with peanut butter and honey tortillas, which I live off of, but not the right fit for everybody, That way we'll have some good variety. And in this way we can bulk buy food and probably spend a lot less per meal than we normally do. So that would be a good thing, right? All right. The trip. Want to have, and this is on the gear list, make sure that you have Ride in the Rain paper. It doesn't have to be that brand, but waterproof paper. And pencils. Recommend mechanical pencils, so that we're not leaving a bunch of pencil shavings all over the place as litter. Not pens and not Sharpies. Sharpies choke and die when there's even a little bit of moisture on the page. And we want to plan for it raining cats and dogs the whole time and having to call off the canoeing thing because the river's at flood stage and it's a total mess and buildings are floating away. That's happened before on this trip, so that's exciting. There are spots along Wild and Scenic Riverways that will raise 40 feet during big rain events and completely cover buildings. Pretty cool stuff. What else? What questions do you guys have about our field trip? It's coming up in a couple of weeks here, so we want to start laying in the supplies and making sure everybody is good to go. What questions do you have? Yeah.
When you say digging up meal prep, what are we expecting for the cooking? Full stoves or just camp stoves or whatever?
Yeah. If we're splitting up the trip between land and water, so we're kind of amphibious, one of those 2 nights will be in, just a regular National Park Service group campground, big cook fire in the fire ring, in addition to a bunch of isobutane mix and white gas stoves, whatever folks would like to use. It's more fun cooking on a fire, but it takes a lot longer. So it's just kind of the mood that you want to put together with your particular meal. Hot breakfasts in particular have proven to be a very useful way to maintain morale on the trip. So we want to make sure that whoever decides you want to cook breakfast instead of dinner for the group, that works better that way. Sorry, I'm assuming that everybody's cool with cooking for the whole group. How would you guys like to deal with nutrition requirements? We can all sort of go it solo and sort of side eyes anybody reaching for our food bags. We can throw in all together, and I can go to Sam's Club or something and get all the ingredients in bulk. for us, and each person, like, or pair of people or whatever, picks a meal to cook for everybody else, and then they're off the rest of the weekend. We can kind of do it however. So what would you guys prefer in terms of meals? If you're a particular eater and you don't want people like fingers in your stuff, it's okay to say, I'd prefer not to cook for everybody. Let's just go on our own. On the other hand, food is kind of a bonding thing, right? So, how would you guys like to go food-wise?
I guess I don't have any reservations, but like, I like to cook, so I wouldn't mind.
Okay, cool. Anybody else? Anybody pretty sure you're gonna kill your classmates if you cook? Like, some folks really don't enjoy cooking. Or your cooking is cursed. Or what have you. Until I got married, my cooking was cursed. During my first year as a professor here at SAU, man, I was eating trash. And not happy. Alright, so based on what I am hearing, cook groups okay? Alright, show of hands. Anybody violently opposed to cook groups and signing up for like a meal for meal prep for everybody? Okay, cool. Then let's go with that. Let's wait till Wednesday's class or maybe later to pick like which meal each folks are doing so you can plan out and find a good recipe like gato gato or something like that. And hopefully we'll have a couple more of your classmates who are out today. Nash's dog is sick. So he's with my wife right now at the vet hospital trying to get Scooter back on his feet. Thoughts and prayers. All right. Other thoughts about the field trip? Does anybody want to or need to drive separately? That's an occasional thing. Okay, that's an option for you. It's extra gas cost, but yeah, the rest of us will be in probably a university van or maybe one of those 14-person buses.
Still waiting to hear back about what that weekend's gonna be like?
Yeah, no worries. Happy to work with you either way. And worst case scenario, you've still got the backstop of the alt option. So, cool. All right, let's end class about 10 minutes early today. Homework assignment for Wednesday is to take a longer tour through that pregame and introduction section for one, maybe into a second of your chosen topics for the semester, and continue filling in. What are some more ideas for hooks? What are some more things that I could do to kind of get the ball rolling to check these 3 or 4 different boxes, so to speak, and that sets me up for victory or success or at least some momentum and energy with that 3-30-3 rule. And just start thinking about it. You don't even need to start writing this yet, but just start thinking about what could some of those thematic content sections be. Each of those 5 to 7 chunks of the outline where it's like the business of the interp. Okay? Yeah.
Leading to like one coherent outline for a singular topic. Like as we've been doing the activities, I've been kind of bouncing around for which topic I have that fits that activity better.
Yeah, no, hang on all of it. Yeah, do them in parallel. Yeah.
Okay, but I don't have like one, full outline for a single topic.
Right, exactly. After 16 weeks, you might be absolutely so sick of crocheting, even though you love it, right? So have 2 or 3 different topics side by side, right? And
They don't all have something for each of the sections of the outline.
say again?
Even if, like for instance, I have like a different topic when I was thinking as I
Uh-huh.
go. So like my outline first go.
Well, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, they all start that way, right? So yeah, that's totally normal. In my introduction to research, and you guys can start packing up if you need to. In my introduction to research methods class, the principles of research forestry 500 level class where I'm teaching grad students how to adult. We're using this exact same process to write documents that are anywhere from 30 to 100 pages long. Just start with an outline and you start filling in the bare bones of it. And in their case, they're taking those outline bullet points and fleshing them out into sentences and then paragraphs and then sections and chapters. You guys, we are explicitly staying with the outline form. Do not go past that. You can have sentences at a bullet point if there's a particular thing that you need to express in a specific way, but we want to not be the person that reads all the text of the PowerPoint because that's kind of insulting and boring for our readers, you know? So, does that kind of answer your question? Yeah, cool. It's okay to have multiple irons in the fire for this class and sort of move them irregularly, respective to each other, forward in terms of developing each. Okay? Cool. So just start thinking about what those thematic sections might have, thematic content. And that'll get us well poised for Wednesday. Keep on moving forward. All right. Thank you very much. I'm around for questions if you have them. Otherwise, we'll see you Wednesday. Cool.